I run a horse rescue ranch in rural Virginia. Most of my days are spent reading animals. I can spot the exact way a mare pins her ears when she's been hit in her past, or the subtle flinch of a gelding at a raised hand. 8 years of this work, and I got pretty damn good at spotting damage in horses. But in people, specifically in my own family, I missed every single sign. What my brother-in-law did at our family reunion last June, and what happened exactly 69 days later at my mother's birthday party, taught me a brutal lesson. The most dangerous predator isn't the one who shows their teeth. It's the one who smiles at your table and calls you family. Welcome back to Karma Diaries. This channel shares powerful family stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the quiet, unyielding strength it takes to protect what you've built. If this story moves you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. I didn't grow up dreaming about horses. I grew up in a small town in the Shenandoah Valley, the daughter of a cafeteria worker and a machinist. My first career was actually built on numbers. I worked as a staff accountant at a small firm in Staunton for 3 years after college, reconciling ledgers and filing quarterly taxes for local businesses. It was good, steady work. But every Saturday, I drove out to a neighbor's farm to help with her horses. And every Monday morning, I sat at my desk thinking about fences instead of spreadsheets. At 25, I found 12 acres with a barn that had more holes than roof. The asking price was low enough that my 3 years of savings, combined with a small SBA loan, covered the down payment. I signed the papers on a Tuesday and started ripping rotten boards off the walls that same afternoon. That first winter, I took in 5 rescue horses. Animals County Services had seized from a severe neglect case. I had no insulation, just a single space heater I carried from stall to stall. I learned fence repair from YouTube. I learned equine nutrition from a retired vet down Route 11. I learned that if you show up at 5:00 a.m. every single day and do the ugly work nobody else wants to touch, eventually the ugly work turns into something real. 8 years later, Acton Ridge Rescue boarded 22 horses. I ran a successful farm store out of the front building selling leather goods, honey, and preserves I made myself. I had also built an equine therapy program for veterans dealing with PTSD. 4 sessions a week, entirely free of charge. Every single evening, I sat at my desk and reconciled the day's numbers. Feed costs, boarding fees, vet bills, down to the exact cent. That rigid financial habit would save my ranch. I just didn't know it yet. My sister, Paige, is 4 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close the way sisters are when there's nobody else around. Same bedroom, same bus stop, same hand-me-down winter coat. Paige was the social one, the pretty one, the one who knew everyone's name at church. I was the quiet one who balanced Mom's checkbook when Dad got sick. Somewhere between her senior prom and my first tax season, a gap opened. Paige married Garrett Hollis when she was 24, after knowing him for just 7 months. Mom didn't say no. Mom never said no to Paige. But I caught her standing at the kitchen sink the night before the wedding, scrubbing the exact same pot for 10 minutes straight. Paige had 2 kids fast, Lily and Mason. She stayed home while Garrett worked in insurance. Every time I visited them, the conversations got shorter and the undertones got louder. "Must be nice to be your own boss," Paige would say. "I wish I could just ride horses all day." I told myself she was just joking. I told myself she was just exhausted from the toddlers. Then there was Mom. Linda Acton, 58, retired from the school cafeteria after 31 years, and widowed when Dad's heart gave out in the garage on a Sunday morning. Mom lived alone, just 20 minutes from my ranch. She wanted one thing more than anything else in this world: her family together under one roof, getting along. "You girls are all I have left," she said at least once a month, because I was the oldest, because I had the space, and because saying no to my mother felt like kicking a kitten. I hosted everything. Every birthday, every holiday, every single gathering, at my ranch, on my dime. Garrett Hollis was the kind of man who could talk for 20 minutes without saying a single true thing. He had a firm handshake, a wide, plastic smile, and a parasitic habit of steering every conversation toward money, specifically, other people's money. The first time he visited Acton Ridge, he walked the property like a buyer. "This place must be worth what? $500,000? Pretty good for a girl who used to just do other people's taxes." I didn't correct his numbers. I didn't correct his condescension. I just poured him iced tea and showed him the barn. That was my mistake pattern. Not confronting, not correcting, just absorbing. 18 months before the reunion, Garrett called me on a Wednesday night. He claimed he desperately needed $3,000 for a car repair. He said his Tahoe's transmission was shot and the shop wouldn't release the vehicle without immediate payment. I sent it via Zelle within the hour. He promised he'd pay me back in 2 weeks. 18 months later, I was still waiting. I brought it up exactly once, during a Sunday dinner at Mom's. Garrett just laughed it off, waving his fork. "Come on, Chels, we're family." Mom nodded along approvingly. Paige stared intently at her plate. I let it go because $3,000 wasn't worth losing my sister over. That's the distorted math you do when you love someone. You weigh the money against the relationship, and you let the money lose. The problem is, people like Garrett never stop doing that math in their own favor. There was one other detail I should have paid attention to. During a casual visit to my farm store, Garrett had asked, "You use QuickBooks or what?" I told him I just used my bank's business app directly on the farm store tablet. I thought it was just idle small talk. I was wrong. Mom called me in early May with the reunion idea, a massive real family reunion. Aunt Harriet, Uncle Tom, cousins Karen and Dean, the whole extended family while everyone was still healthy enough to enjoy it. She wanted it at the ranch, of course. I said yes because I always said yes. I spent 3 grueling weeks preparing, rented extra tables and chairs, hired a local barbecue caterer, strung string lights across the barn entrance, set up pony rides for the kids with Biscuit, my gentlest mare, and stocked the farm store. The entire event cost me about $4,000 out of pocket. I didn't mention the cost to anyone, because mentioning it would make Mom feel guilty and make Paige feel inferior. June 15th, Saturday. Over 30 people showed up under a cloudless Virginia sky. Burgers sizzling on the grill, kids chasing each other through the pastures, Aunt Harriet hugging me so hard my ribs cracked. It was the kind of idyllic day that makes you believe family is worth every single penny. I was running the farm store register on my iPad, the same device tied to my business banking app, ringing up jars of honey and leather key fobs for cousins I hadn't seen in years. Around 2 p.m., one of my boarding mares spooked at a kid's runaway balloon and slammed her leg against her stall door. Miguel, my stable hand, radioed me in a panic. I set the tablet down on the counter, looked at Garrett, who was standing right there with a beer in his hand, and said, "Hey, can you watch the register for a few minutes? I've got a horse emergency." He smiled warmly. "Sure thing, Chels. Go handle your animals." That was the first time Garrett had ever volunteered to help with anything. I was in the barn for exactly 8 minutes. The mare, Duchess, had a minor scrape on her hock. Nothing serious. Cold hose, wrap, done. When I walked back into the farm store, Garrett was standing behind the counter, scrolling furiously on the tablet. He looked up instantly, his face flushing. "Just checking if the card reader synced," he stammered. The card reader was sitting on the counter, completely unplugged. I glanced at the screen. My banking app was minimized but still running actively in the background. I had logged in earlier that morning to process a vendor payment, and in the chaotic rush of the reunion, I hadn't logged out. I picked up the tablet, closed the app, and locked the screen. 8 minutes. That's all the time he needed. But my internal alarms didn't go off yet. This was a family reunion, my sister's husband, the man who had held my niece at her baptism. Your brain refuses to process a threat under those conditions. It files the behavior away as odd and moves on. Later that evening, while everyone was eating cake, Paige pulled me aside near the pasture fence. Chelsea, how much does it actually cost to run this place every month? Like, really? I gave her a rough ballpark. Feed, vet, insurance, Miguel's pay, utilities, around $7,000 to $8,000. She nodded slowly, her eyes tracking the property. Wow, that's a lot. I watched her expression. It wasn't sympathetic. It was calculating, like she was measuring the depth of a well. Aunt Harriet interrupted us to take a group photo. Paige smiled perfectly for the camera. In that photo, we are standing, shoulder to shoulder, our arms wrapped around each other. Sisters. I still keep that photo on my fridge. It serves as a daily reminder that the people closest to you are the ones who can reach the deepest into your pockets. Everyone left by 7 p.m. I cleaned up the entire mess alone, which was standard. I swept the barn aisle, stacked the rented chairs, and hauled heavy trash bags to the dumpster. By 9:30 p.m., I was finally at my desk doing what I did every night, checking the numbers. I opened the banking app on my laptop and looked at the operating account balance. 3,847. I stared blankly at the screen. On Friday, the day before the reunion, that balance had been $50,847. 3 separate Zelle transfers had left my account that afternoon in rapid succession. $18,000 at 2:14 p.m., $15,000 at 2:22 p.m., $14,000 at 2:31 p.m., totaling $47,000. Gone in a matter of 17 minutes. The recipient field showed the stark initials. GHI checked it 3 times, 4 times, 5. My hands began to shake. I called the bank's after-hours fraud line. The automated system confirmed the transactions were fully cleared. A live agent eventually told me that because the transfers originated from a recognized registered device on my own network, they could not reverse them as fraud without an official police report. I sat in the dark barn that night on an overturned bucket, wedged between the feed room door and Juniper. The first horse I ever rescued, a one-eyed thoroughbred who had been left to starve. $3,847. That was barely 3 weeks of feed for 22 horses. After that, I would have to make the heartbreaking choice of which animals to send away. I pressed my forehead against Juniper's warm neck and just tried to breathe. Sunday morning, I sat on my porch with black coffee I couldn't even taste and called Garrett. He picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding incredibly cheerful. Hey, Chels! Great party yesterday. Lily hasn't stopped talking about Biscuit. I didn't play along. Garrett, I need to talk to you about 3 Zelle transfers totaling $47,000 taken from my business account yesterday. Dead silence. 4 seconds of suffocating quiet. Then, a sound. Not a laugh, but a snort. The arrogant exhale of a man who thinks the question is beneath him. Oh, that. Yeah. Listen, Chels, we needed it. Paige didn't want to ask you directly because she knew you'd make it into a whole big production. We're drowning in some bills, mortgage stuff. We'll pay it back. Pay it back when? I demanded. When I close on this big deal I've got in the pipeline. A couple of months. Tops. You accessed my business account without my knowledge and drained $47,000. My voice cracked with rage. That's not borrowing, Garrett. That's grand theft. His entire tone shifted instantly. The fake charm evaporated, replaced by cold, hard malice. Theft? Come on. Get over yourself. We needed it way more than you do. You've got your massive ranch, your horses, your little boutique store. We've got 2 actual kids and a mortgage we can't make. So yeah, we took it. And frankly, Chelsea, you owe your sister. She's been sitting back watching you play farmer princess for years while we scrape by. We needed it more. I let his words hang in the air. Not because they hurt, though they cut deep, but because they provided absolute clarity. This wasn't a man who felt an ounce of guilt. This was a man who felt entirely entitled to the fruits of my labor. I hung up on him. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the hard, clean edge of understanding that no conversation could ever fix this. Monday morning, my phone rang before I even finished morning feeding. It was Mom. Chelsea. Honey. Paige called me, hysterical. I know you're upset, but they are going through a horribly dark time. Garrett's been under an immense amount of pressure at work. You know how stressful it is for young families. Mom, he stole $47,000 from my operating account. He borrowed it, Chelsea. There's a distinct difference. And, frankly, she paused, carefully selecting the words she believed would force me to back down. Family doesn't keep score, Chelsea. Family doesn't keep score. I had heard variations of that exact emotional blackmail my entire life. I heard it when I paid for Paige's car repairs, when I covered Mom's heavy dental bills, and when I lent Garrett $3,000 that vanished into thin air. The score was always rigged. Chelsea gives, everyone else takes. And the moment I noticed the pattern, I was labeled the problem. Mom, $47,000 isn't a score, I yelled into the phone. It's my payroll. It's my winter feed supplier. It's the emergency vet bill due next week. If I don't get that money back immediately, I start losing my animals. Well, can't you just take out a small business loan or dip into your personal savings? My savings built this ranch. My operating account runs it. He completely emptied it. Just let it go, Chelsea, Mom pleaded, her voice cracking. I don't want this to tear our family apart. I looked out the office window, 22 horses, grazing peacefully in the morning sun. Miguel hauling heavy hay bales. My farm store still decorated with the remnants of the reunion. Letting this go meant letting my ranch die. And this ranch was the only thing in my life that had never lied to me. I'll handle it, Mom, I said coldly. And I meant it, just not in the way she hoped. Monday afternoon, I drove straight to the bank. The branch manager, Diane, who had handled my accounts since day one, pulled up the transaction logs. 3 Zelle transfers. Device. Chelsea's iPad. IP address. Matching my ranch's Wi-Fi network. Timestamps. 2:14, 2:22, and 2:31 p.m. The exact window I was trapped in the barn. The system reads this as an authorized transaction because it came from your registered device on your network. Diane explained gently. Without a formal police report establishing criminal unauthorized access, the bank cannot reverse these funds. Then give me the paperwork, I replied. I need a police report. I immediately called Ruth Calloway. Ruth was 55, a forensic CPA who had handled my taxes for 6 years. She was the most fiercely methodical person I knew, the kind of woman who color-coded her grocery lists. Ruth came to my kitchen table on Tuesday night with her laptop and a mountain of records. What she uncovered was horrifying. The $47,000 had been split. 2 transfers went directly into Garrett's personal checking account, $18,000 and $14,000. 1 transfer of $15,000 went into a joint account held by Garrett and Paige. From his personal account, Garrett immediately initiated 2 outgoing wires. $18,000 went to an entity called Hollis Property Group, LLC. Ruth ran a corporate state search. The LLC had been legally dissolved 6 months prior. The business was a ghost. The second wire of $14,000 went directly to a well-known online sports betting platform. My stomach bottomed out. And the $15,000 in the joint account, I asked, dreading the answer. Withdrawn entirely in cash, Ruth said, pointing at the screen. ATM withdrawal structured over 48 hours. 4 separate transactions of $3,750 each, specifically designed to stay just under the bank's $4,000 daily limit. There's no digital trail after the ATM. He was likely paying off physical bookmakers or dangerous street creditors. Ruth looked at me over her glasses. Chelsea, this isn't a family loan. The money was moved, fractured, and cashed out within 48 hours. That's active concealment. A prosecutor will call this grand larceny. Compile your alibi, get Miguel's statement, and go to the police. Emotion won't hold up in court. Numbers will. Friday morning, I walked into the county sheriff's office and requested Deputy Earl Beckett. Earl was a stoic man built like a fence post, but he had a deeply empathetic way of listening. I knew him well. His son, a Marine veteran suffering from severe PTSD, had been one of the very first participants in my equine therapy program. I laid the evidence out on the metal table. Bank statements, device logs, Ruth's forensic accounting summary, and a signed affidavit from Miguel proving my exact location during the theft. Beckett reviewed every page, marking details with a pencil. He finally leaned back. "Ma'am, you've done half my job for me." He looked at me heavily. "Are you absolutely sure you want to pursue this? This is your sister's husband. This will get ugly." He stole $47,000 meant to keep 22 rescue animals alive, and he gambled it away on sports bets, I said, my voice deadpan. "If I don't get it back, these animals lose their sanctuary." "Yes, Deputy, I am entirely sure." He filed the report and assigned a case number. He warned me it would take several weeks for the district attorney to formalize felony charges. On my drive home, I passed Paige's pristine subdivision. Garrett's silver Tahoe sat in the driveway, the same vehicle I had paid $3,000 to fix. My niece's pink bicycle lay on its side in the front yard. My throat tightened. These were my flesh and blood, and I had just set the law on them. I kept driving. The following Tuesday, Paige's minivan violently pulled into my gravel driveway. Lily and Mason tumbled out, yelling, "Aunt Chelsea, can we ride, Biscuit?" I nodded to Miguel, who gently led them away to the round pen. Paige walked into the farm store. She looked hollow. Dark purple circles bruised the skin under her eyes, and her nails were chewed down to the quick. "Chelsea, I know what Garrett did was fundamentally wrong," she began. "Standard manipulation. An admission wrapped neatly in a justification. But you filed a literal police report against your own family? He stole from me, Paige." "He was desperate," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You have no idea what our life has been like. The constant bills, the collectors calling during dinner, the foreclosure letters. He didn't want to ask you because he was too proud and too stupid." I stood completely still. When dealing with a terrified, dangerous horse, you don't move, you don't shout. You hold your ground, breathe slowly, and let them reveal themselves. I used that exact technique on my sister, and then she spat the real truth. "You have your precious horses. We have absolutely nothing." I looked at her. Then I looked through the store window at the beautiful barn I had rebuilt with my own bleeding hands, board by rotten board. I looked at the pastures I had fenced, post by heavy post. I looked at the 22 souls who completely depended on me for survival, and she called all of it nothing. She dismissed 8 years of grueling 5 a.m. mornings, broken fingers, maxed out credit lines, and agonizing sacrifices as nothing, simply because it wasn't a cookie-cutter house in a subdivision with a 2-car garage. "I started with nothing too, Paige," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "An abandoned barn and 5 starving horses nobody else wanted. But I didn't steal from anyone to fix it. I built it." She grabbed her kids and left without another word. By the end of July, my business account dropped below $1,000. My feed delivery was due. $6,200 for the hay and grain needed to keep the herd alive. I called my longtime supplier, Dale. "Dale, I need to push my payment back by 2 weeks. I'm facing a severe crisis." There was a long pause. "Chelsea, you've never been late a single day in 8 years. 2 weeks is fine." The relief lasted less than an hour before a $2,800 vet invoice landed in my inbox, followed by the automated payroll reminder for Miguel's $2,400 bi-weekly salary. I was completely cornered. I slashed prices in the farm store by 20%, working day and night to drum up walk-in business. I scraped together enough to cover Miguel and a portion of the vet bill, but I had to make the agonizing decision to temporarily suspend the Thursday Veterans Therapy Group. I lied to the coordinator, citing scheduling conflicts. I couldn't bring myself to admit that I couldn't afford the liability insurance premium that week. That Thursday evening, I walked the barn aisle at dusk, checking water buckets. Juniper pushed her velvety muzzle against my shoulder. $47,000. Garrett called it a necessities. My mother called it family business. Paige called my life work nothing. But that money represented 8 months of life-saving feed. It was a year of Miguel's salary. It was 3 full years of a free therapy program for broken men and women. It wasn't spare family money. It was the literal lifeblood of my operation, and it had been vaporized on a gambling website. The final blow landed in the first week of August. I was clearing out an old storage shed behind the store, trying to find old equipment I could liquidate for quick cash, when I found a denim jacket hanging on a nail by the door. It was Paige's. She had left it behind on the day of the reunion. Before tossing it into a donation bin, I instinctively checked the pockets. The left pocket held a crumpled tissue. The right pocket held a neatly folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a printed screenshot of my business banking app displaying my exact operating balance, $50,847.23. The timestamp on the printed screenshot read, 2:08 p.m., June 15th, exactly 6 minutes before the very first Zelle transfer occurred, and right there in the stark white margin, written in Paige's distinct, looping handwriting, a handwriting I knew as well as my own, was a short, devastating note, enough. G says yes. The world stood completely still. The last wall of defense I had built in my mind to protect my sister crumbled into ash. Paige hadn't just known about the theft after the fact. She had scouted it. She walked into my store, used my open tablet to verify my balance, confirmed the amount was large enough to be worth stealing, printed the proof, and handed her husband the green light to systematically strip my life work away. I carefully placed the paper into a plastic sleeve and drove straight to Ruth's office. Ruth read the note twice, her face hardening. This completely shifts the legal paradigm, Chelsea. This isn't just unauthorized computer access anymore. This is a criminal conspiracy. I added the document to my expanding evidence folder. It was getting heavy. Mom called me a few days later. Her 58th birthday party was 2 weeks away. No drama, Chelsea. I mean it. You and Paige need to sit down and resolve this petty squabble before my party. Mom, this isn't a squabble. There is an active police investigation. The district attorney is preparing formal charges. A district attorney? Mom gasped. Chelsea, you are going to send your own sister's husband to prison. He stole $47,000 and gambled it away on sports bets, Mom. The line went completely dead. In the background, I could hear the faint, cheerful sound of a television game show. What did you say? She whispered. He's a compulsive gambler, Mom. Ruth traced the money. It didn't go to mortgages or medical bills. It went to online betting, sites, and physical bookies. They lied to you. Mom didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice sounded entirely broken, the voice she used when something shattered beyond repair. I didn't know that. I know you didn't. Are you still coming to my birthday? I could have said no. I could have protected my peace and stayed at the ranch. But there were 22 horses depending on my ability to face monsters head-on. Every private door I had tried, Garrett Page, Mom, had been slammed in my face. This birthday party was the only door left open. I'll be there, Mom, I said firmly. I wouldn't miss it. August 23rd, Mom's Smalls ranch-style home on Maple Street. She had strung up elegant lights across the backyard and set up a beautiful, long wooden table beneath the massive oak tree. There were 15 people total. Family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few close neighbors. I arrived at 5 p.m. with my evidence folder zipped securely in my shoulder bag and a gift in my hands. A custom photo frame I had crafted out of reclaimed barn wood, holding a beautiful picture of Mom and Dad on their 30th anniversary. Mom wept when she opened it, holding me tight. Dinner was pleasant on the surface. A masterclass in superficial family harmony. Ribs, potato salad, corn on the cob. People laughed, sharing boisterous stories about my late father. It felt almost entirely normal. Then, Aunt Harriet turned to me between bites of corn. So, Chelsea, how is the ranch? Paige mentioned you've been having some severe financial trouble lately. The entire table went quiet. I slowly put my fork down. I looked across the table at Paige, who was suddenly studying her plate with intense focus. I unzipped my bag, reached inside, and pulled out the thick beige folder. Actually, Aunt Harriet, I'm incredibly glad you brought that up, I said, standing up calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the clinical, detached cadence of a veterinarian delivering a medical report. I want to correct some massive misrepresentations. I am not having financial trouble. Someone systematically stole my livelihood. Garrett immediately slammed his beer glass down onto the table. On June 15th, during our family reunion, 3 completely unauthorized Zelle transfers drained $47,000 from my business account. I continued, pulling out copies of the bank statements with the transactions highlighted in bright yellow and passing them directly to Aunt Harriet. The transfers were executed from my farm store tablet during an 8-minute window when I was in the barn treating a bleeding horse. My stable hand, Miguel, has provided a sworn, signed affidavit confirming my exact location during those exact timestamps. Garrett pushed his chair back violently. Chelsea, what the hell are you doing? This is your mother's birthday. Stop this psychotic behavior. I locked eyes with him. Steady hands, steady eyes. I know exactly what day it is, Garrett. Do you remember June 15th? That was the day you stood behind my counter and funneled my money into your accounts. The entire backyard plunged into a suffocating silence. Even the crickets seemed to die out. Garrett recovered quickly, falling back on his rehearsed defense. This is absolute insanity. It was a family loan to cover our crashing bills. I told her explicitly I'd pay it back. She's turning a private family matter into a federal case because she's bitter. I pulled the next document from the folder and handed it to Uncle Tom, who was sitting closest to me. This is a forensic accounting summary prepared by Ruth Calloway, CPA. It tracks exactly where the family loan went. I pointed a finger directly at Garrett. $18,000 went to Hollis Property Group, an LLC that was legally dissolved 6 months before the transfer. A ghost company. $14,000 went directly to an online sports gambling platform. The entire atmosphere in the yard shifted violently, like the sudden dropping of barometric pressure before a massive storm. Uncle Tom gasped as he read the document. Cousin Karen covered her mouth in absolute horror. I turned my gaze slowly to my sister. $15,000 went into your joint checking account, Paige, and was systematically stripped out in cash via ATMs within 48 hours to pay off local bookmakers. Paige's voice came out in a ragged whisper. I didn't know about the gambling, Chelsea. I swear to God I didn't know. I reached deep into the folder, pulled out the plastic evidence sleeve, and held it up high for the entire table to see. This is a screenshot of my bank balance printed out. I found it in your jacket pocket, Paige. And this is your exact handwriting in the margin. It says, enough. G says yes. It was time-stamped 6 minutes before the first dollar left my account. Paige went entirely white. All the color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost. Good God, Uncle Tom muttered, dropping the papers onto the table. Aunt Harriet set her fork down, her face twisted in disgust. Garrett stood up fully, his fists clenched so tightly, his knuckles turned translucent. He looked around the table frantically, searching for a single ally, an escape route, a sympathetic face. He found nothing. With logic entirely exhausted, he reached for his final weapon, pure rage. You petty, narcissistic bot, he roared, slamming his palm onto the wood table. Plates jumped, silverware clattered. 10 feet away at the kids' table, little Lily burst into terrified tears. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? With your grandiose ranch, your stupid horses, and your holier-than-thou act. This entire family bends over backward to worship St. Chelsea while we can't even keep our electricity on. You're trying to destroy this family over a miserable piece of change. I remained completely seated, my hands flat on the open folder. I'm not asking for your apology, Garrett. I am showing my family the unvarnished truth with verified documents, because documents don't have opinions. Over $47,000, he screamed, his voice cracking with the pathetic desperation of a cornered animal. Over $47,000 of feed money, payroll, and medical care for abused animals. I said, my voice cutting through his volume like a razor. Money you put on a football game. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no idea I had traced the gambling trail. He assumed the money was buried deep enough. But numbers don't bury, they always surface. Paige stood up, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling violently. Stop it! Both of you! Just stop! She turned to me, her voice breaking. I didn't want it to happen like this, Chelsea. I told him not to take that much. I told him. She froze mid-sentence. She heard her own words. She realized she had just openly confessed to the entire extended family that she had actively negotiated the theft, rather than trying to prevent it. I kept my voice incredibly soft. How much of my money were you okay with him stealing, Paige? She stared at me, completely trapped. I thought maybe 10,000. Just to save the house. Just to catch up. I didn't know about the gambling, Chelsea. I swear I didn't know. I looked at my sister, and for the first time, I truly saw her. I saw the desperate, trapped woman with no income of her own, 2 small children, and a monster for a husband. But I also saw the calculated thief who verified my balance, wrote the word enough, and handed over the keys to my vault. Both things were true at the exact same time. I believe you didn't know about the gambling, I said quietly, but you scouted my account. You watched him walk behind my counter, and you chose to say absolutely nothing to me. I was terrified, Chelsea. If we lost the house, Lily's school district, everything. I understand fear, Paige. I've lived in fear for 8 grueling years. Fear of every vet bill, every spike in feed prices, every midnight colic emergency. But I never once stole from you. Paige sank back into her chair, her legs completely giving out. Mom sat at the head of the table, burying her face in her hands, whispering, Girls, please, stop! I'm almost done. Mom, I said. I pulled the very last page from the folder. The document with the distinctive county sheriff's letterhead. This is a copy of the official police report. The district attorney has finalized the charges. Grand larceny by unauthorized computer access. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, for this amount, it is prosecuted as a Class 5 felony. The word felony landed on the table like a lead weight. Garrett went entirely gray. Not angry, not frustrated, but the hollow, ashy gray of a man who realizes his future has just been completely rearranged. You called the cops, he whispered, staring at me in utter disbelief. On family? You stole $47,000 from a nonprofit animal rescue, Garrett. That's not a family matter. That's a felony. I'll pay it back, every single cent. I swear to God, he pleaded, stepping toward me with his hands out. Just call them off. Tell them it was a massive misunderstanding. I folded my hands over the beige folder. I don't make mistakes with numbers, Garrett. You know that. Aunt Harriet leaned forward, her eyes wide. Chelsea, is there any way to resolve this without courts? I looked at her with pure, unadulterated exhaustion. Aunt Harriet, I tried. I called him privately. He told me he deserved it more than me. I went to Mom. She told me family doesn't keep score. I went to Paige. She told me my horses were nothing. I am showing you this folder because every single human door was slammed in my face. This was the only door left open. Nobody spoke. The birthday cake sat directly in the center of the table, the blue frosting reading Happy 58th Linda, completely untouched. Garrett tried one final, desperate play. He turned to my mother. Linda, he shouted, using her first name to demand her status as a legal equal rather than a mother. Are you seriously going to sit there and let her execute this ambush at your own birthday party? She is intentionally tearing this family apart over paper. Mom looked between Garrett's panicked face and my steady eyes. I could see the agonizing war playing out across her features. The woman who desperately wanted superficial peace versus the woman who had just discovered her family was funded by a gambling addict. Garrett pressed harder. She has more money than all of us combined. The ranch, the store, the assets. $47,000 is absolutely nothing to her. She won't even miss it. I didn't raise my voice. It is not nothing to the 22 horses who depend on me for survival. It is not nothing to Miguel, who needs to feed his own family. It is not nothing to the veterans who drive here for free therapy. The money is gone. Garrett. The room completely aligned. I felt the tide pull away from him. Aunt Harriet gave a single, firm nod of approval. Uncle Tom crossed his arms tightly, staring at the ground. Cousin Dean looked at Garrett with pure contempt. Garrett looked around the table, realizing he had absolutely no foothold left. He leaned over the table, his eyes turning predatory, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You will regret this, Chelsea. I promise you, on everything I own, you will deeply regret this." I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and set it directly on the table, the screen illuminating. I'd like everyone present to note that explicit verbal threat. Cousin Dean stood up. "That sounded exactly like a threat, Garrett. Back away from her." "It's not. I didn't mean." 3 thunderous knocks on the front door cut him off. Mom stood up mechanically, her chair scraping loudly against the concrete patio. She walked through the dark kitchen to the front door and opened it. Deputy Earl Beckett stood under the porch light in full tactical uniform, his gold badge gleaming. His partner stood a step behind him. "Evening, ma'am. I'm deeply sorry to interrupt. We're looking for Garrett Hollis." Mom's hand tightened on the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. "What is this about?" "Ma'am, we have a felony warrant. May we come inside?" She stepped back in silence. Beckett walked firmly through the kitchen and stepped out onto the back patio. His eyes swept across the abandoned plates, the uncut cake, the open folder in front of me, and locked onto Garrett. "Mr. Hollis, step away from the table. I have a warrant for your immediate arrest for grand larceny by unauthorized access to a computer in connection with the theft of $47,000 from Acton Ridge Rescue on June 15th. The words were cold, formal, and rhythmic. But in that quiet backyard, under those beautiful string lights, they sounded like a thunderclap. Garrett looked at me as Beckett pulled his arms behind his back. "You actually did it," he whispered. I didn't look away. "I told you on the phone, Garrett. It wasn't borrowing." The metal handcuffs clicked open and snapped shut around his wrists. Paige let out a blood-curdling scream. Not a word, just raw, feral grief. She threw herself over Mason and pulled Lily tight. "No! Chelsea! Please stop this. Think about the children. Think about the kids." I looked at my sobbing sister, at my terrified niece, and at my confused nephew. "I didn't start this, Paige." "He did. I'm just finishing it." Mom stood in the kitchen doorway, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, but profound, crushing grief. "I just didn't want to lose either of my girls." "You didn't lose me, Mom," I said, my voice unbroken and steady. "You lost $47,000 of my livelihood because you believed family didn't keep score." "You're right, Mom. Family doesn't keep score. But the Commonwealth of Virginia does." Beckett led Garrett through the house. The heavy front door clicked shut. The backyard table was left half empty, plates of cold food abandoned, Uncle Tom's beer going entirely flat in the humid night air. The birthday cake sat perfectly intact in the center. A monument to a family that used to be whole. Aunt Harriet moved first, pulling her chair directly next to mine and wrapping a strong arm around my shoulder. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. I know it feels like death right now, but you protected what was yours." Uncle Tom leaned back, blowing out a long breath. "If a man stole that from my machine shop, I'd have done a hell of a lot worse than call the law." I walked over to my mother, who was sitting alone at the head of the table, staring blankly at the blue frosting. I sat down beside her. I didn't touch her. "Mom, I am deeply sorry this happened on your birthday. But I didn't choose the timing. You told me to have this resolved before your party. It is resolved." She looked at me with pooling eyes. "Was it truly worth it, Chelsea? $47,000 of feed, payroll, and survival for 22 abused animals?" "Yes, Mom, it was worth it. Those horses can't file their own police reports." She didn't answer. I picked up my bag, kissed her gently on the forehead, and said, Happy birthday, Mom. I drove back to the ranch in total darkness. The moment my headlights swept across the front pasture, I saw Juniper standing right at the fence line, waiting. The way she always waited. 6 weeks after the birthday party, the legal dust finally settled. Garrett's defense attorney negotiated a plea agreement with the district attorney. The original grand larceny charge was reduced to a lesser felony in exchange for a straight guilty plea, full court-ordered restitution, 200 hours of community service, and 2 years of heavily supervised probation. A mandatory condition of his probation was intensive gambling addiction counseling. The restitution was structured as an immediate wage garnishment. I receive exactly $4,300 on the first of every month, paid directly through the state court system. No personal contact required. It isn't the lump sum, but it is completely legally enforceable. The state declined to press criminal charges against Paige. The DA determined she had not technically executed the digital transfers herself. Garrett's digital fingerprints were on the code, not hers. But that handwritten note, "Enough. G says yes," was permanently entered into the public court file. Her involvement is on the record forever. In September, Paige officially filed for legal separation. She liquidated their asset-negative house, packed up Lily and Mason, and moved back into Mom's house. Garrett now lives in a cramped studio apartment on the industrial side of town. As for the ranch, we survived the brutal winter. I secured a small emergency disaster loan from the Agricultural Credit Union, backed by a fierce reference letter written by Ruth Calloway. Dale extended our feed credit through the summer without a single complaint, and Miguel never missed a single day of work. He told me down in the stalls one morning, "Mrs. Acton, my last boss forgot to pay me 3 separate times and blamed the banking system. You didn't have a dime in your account, and my check was still on the desk. I'm not going anywhere." The equine therapy program officially restarted in September. Deputy Beckett's son, Travis, came out for the very first session, bringing along another Marine fresh out of an inpatient PTSD facility. They spent a quiet hour with Juniper in the round pen. Before leaving, Travis shook my hand firmly. "She's still got it," he said, nodding toward the horse. Then he looked at me. "And so do you." Mom called me in October, the first time we had spoken since the arrest. "Chelsea, can I come see the ranch?" "You're always welcome here, Mom," I replied. She drove up on a crisp Saturday morning. I watched her walk the property slowly, the way she used to walk the school cafeteria line, quietly taking inventory of everything that required tending. She stood at the pasture fence for a long time, watching the horses graze. Eventually, she sat on the porch with me, drinking iced tea in the autumn sun. "I should have listened to you," she said, her voice small. "I should have listened to the numbers. I truly didn't know about the gambling. I know you didn't, Mom, but you knew they were drowning, and your solution was to force me to absorb the impact. You've done that since I was 16 years old, working 2 summer jobs so Paige could go to dance camp." She looked down at her glass, her eyes welling up. "Your father used to look at me and say, 'Linda, you ask entirely too much of Chelsea.' He was right. I am so incredibly sorry, Chelsea. For the scorekeeping line, for the pressure, for all of it. I forgive you, Mom," I said, and I genuinely meant it. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, and it's certainly not about letting people back into the vault. It's simply realizing that carrying the burning weight of resentment costs far more than setting it down on the dirt. But I am drawing a hard line in the sand. My money is my money. My ranch is my business. If you or Paige ever need help, you come to me, you open your mouth, and you ask. You do not take, and I am the one who decides." She gave a small, tired nod. "Fair enough." In November, Paige brought Lily and Mason to the ranch for the first time since the explosion. The kids screamed my name the second the minivan doors opened, running full tilt toward the barn in their muddy boots. "Aunt Chels, is Biscuit ready? Can we ride?" I let Miguel and our new apprentice, Jess, handle the saddling while Paige stood quietly by the wooden fence line. She didn't step over the perimeter. She didn't enter the barn. She stood on the outside of ground. She used to walk completely free, waiting for permission. After an hour, I walked over and leaned against the top rail beside her. We watched Lily brushing Juniper's mane with absolute reverence. "I am so sorry," Paige whispered. The words sat between us, frail, completely inadequate, but all she had left to offer. "I know," I replied. "Will it ever be the same between us?" she asked, her lip trembling. I watched Juniper lower her heavy head, allowing my niece to press her small forehead against her muzzle in total trust. "No, Paige, it will never be the same. But Lily and Mason are welcome here every single weekend. They are my niece and nephew? That bloodline doesn't cut. But as for us, you checked my balance, verified the harvest, and handed your husband the axe. I need time, maybe a lot of time." She swallowed hard, blinked back tears, and nodded. "I understand." I watched her load the kids back into the van. Mason pressed his hand against the glass, waving furiously. I waved back, standing at the gravel gate until their taillights faded into the horizon. Then, I turned around and walked back to my barn. I walk the fence line every morning at dawn, just like I have for 8 years. The barn roof is fully repaired. The ledgers balance perfectly. The horses are fed. I used to believe that being the strong one in a family meant carrying everyone else's weights across the finish line. It doesn't. Being strong means having the discernment to know when someone is actively stealing from the load instead of helping you carry it. And it means having the quiet, unshakable courage to set the weight completely down. My ranch didn't survive because I gave everything away. It survived because I finally learned what was mine to protect. And I protect it the only way I know how, with steady hands and honest numbers. That's my story. One family reunion, one drained account, and 69 days that changed everything. I learned that being family doesn't give anyone the right to cross your boundaries, abuse your trust, or take what you've worked hard to build. Sometimes the people closest to you teach the hardest lessons about self-respect and accountability. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs this reminder today. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to set boundaries with family to protect yourself? Thank you for spending your time with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful, real-life stories. I'll see you in the next one.